call the February meeting of the Environmental Commission to order. First, we'll start with roll call.
Chair Horn.
Here.
Vice Chair Serafin.
Here.
Alderman Craig.
Present.
Myself, Sudarshan Sharma, present.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so next we'll do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item 2, citizen comment period. Is there anyone wishing to make a comment?
Can I ask for just clarification on the process this evening? So I'm Greg Marshall, the one who's got the NRSC, and these are some of the neighbors that want to speak in regard to that. Would you prefer they speak now or just wait till it's on the agenda item?
Your compatriots should speak during the citizen comment period, but you are welcome to make a presentation with the NRSC presentation. So, yep. So if these gentlemen want to make a comment now.
If anyone wants to make a comment, just state your name and your address.
Do you prefer it now or with context after Greg speaks?
Now.
Now would be the time to.
Now.
Yeah, use the microphone, please.
I'm Bill Mrezowitz. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association for Windham Hills. I think actually pictures can say a lot. If you'd like to display or pass around some pictures of the issue we're facing, I'm happy to give that to you. The situation is this, that back in 1994, there was a drain put in for the wetland. That's Greg's documentation. We'll talk to that in detail. I have had people, I've been living in that subdivision since 2017, and it's had excessively high water levels that drain extremely slowly. And it's affected not only my property around the wetland, but all of those gentlemen that are here representing their properties. The issue to us is not where the drain is today or would be in the future. That's been determined back, when the documents were put together and what Greg is proposing. The issue is that the drain that was put in, from the assessment I have from a contractor, looked like it was temporary. It was not something he would ever have installed if he were doing the work. And his feeling was that it was put in 1994 when the subdivision was being created, but nobody came back to finish the actual drain. It's corrugated, it has trees on top of it, and he said it's not effective. It drains into a city sewer, a storm sewer, and between two homes. I walk by that area a lot. There is just a trickle of water that ever comes out of it. It clearly is not functioning after big storms. In 2009, the city engineering people, whoever was in charge at that time, asked Greg Marceau on the lot that we're speaking of, this empty lot, to come immediately, if he would, and cut a trench through the middle of his lot to empty water out into a different storm sewer that is 3 houses away from the one I just alluded to. That has been the de facto drain since 2009. That also still continues to drain as a trickle. And I have pictures to show you that weeks after the big storm we had, it still is draining through that empty lot. And our issue is we know there's going to be big rains. We know water will come up high. We just want a drain put in place that will empty the water quickly, as it should be, according to what the codes prescribe, and not something where it's overgrown and temporary and never really worked in the first place. And these gentlemen have had massively bad issues in their backyards where the water comes right up to patios and stays there for weeks on end. And is there now. I have a picture from one of the neighbors who's not here as of February 24th that it's terrible and untenable. So our support is for what Greg is proposing, not only for the development of the lot, which we think would be good because a vacant lot is never great. It's a beautiful subdivision. We'd like to see a home built on it. And this drain put in place is paramount in not only helping the entire subdivision, but making that lot usable. If you'd like the pictures, I'm happy to send them around. Because one other thing, the first picture I would show you is I also contacted We Energies almost 2 years ago now, and I had them come out and looked at a step-down transformer that's in my backyard, which is typically a third underwater. There's another step-down transformer about 4 houses to the east of me that has the same situation. It's more where these gentlemen live. They agreed that it needed to be moved 20 yards away from that wetland because it's constantly underwater and the foundation of it is already tilted, has been tilted. They didn't have parts at the time. They were still recovering from the supply chain issues. So I talked to them 2 weeks ago, and they're planning to come out this spring as schedules and water levels allow, and they're going to move those transformers out because they said they're a safety hazard, and they know they have to do it. And I have a picture of that as well. I'll just send this around to you all. You can just, buzz through it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think if you need to display it, you can, but I don't think it's worth that. Just fan yourself across. I put some notations on it.
Anyone else?
So, is it okay if I hand these out, give you the pictures now? Is that okay?
Sure.
So, I'm one of the neighbors that bears the brunt of this.
And please give us your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian Alexander,
Okay, and address.
7529 South Cambridge. Thank you, sorry.
Okay.
And, so if you go through these pictures, it's pretty evident, and I've dated them. So everybody has a chance to get the pictures in front of them. So the first picture is 2019. This is when the problem got worse and worse. And you could see even then I still have some green and shrubbery there, right? So there's 2 pictures from 2019. That covers my entire backyard, okay? Then I go to the fall of 2020, and I'm even more underwater. So significant water, and this is in the fall. So we get water not only in the spring, but in the fall. So essentially everything but about 6 weeks of the year, I have water in my backyard. Now you go to 2023, and it's a pretty stark contrast if you compare it to the first picture I gave you. You can see all the trees are gone, all the shrubs are gone, my mound is gone. You know, it's a really emotional thing. We're losing our backyards, right? And we need a solution. And we've been asking for a solution. This year is just about to be sandbag season for me. So I sandbag my backyard every year, both in the spring and the fall. If I get flooded, if my basement gets flooded, huge loss in property value. I can't enjoy my backyard. I've lost my backyard. Spent thousands on re-landscaping. I go through 2 sump pumps a year. They're constantly running. I've built mounds that get washed away. I've brought landscapers in to do work. I've lost trees, which will never be replaced. They're 30-foot tall trees. You'll see them in that first picture. They're all gone. And now, as you just alluded to, February, we already have water. It's the earliest we've had water. I checked before I got here. We have half the snowfall over the last 5 months than we have on average. Half the snowfall. So half the precipitation, and I have water in my backyard earlier than ever before. I can't sell the house. I'm worried about my property values. I'm worried about flooding a basement. So we really need a solution. And I'm glad we've got this far, and I appreciate you listening to us. And whatever we need to do to help push this over, we would really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Sure. Name and address.
Name is Pete Sobek. Address is 7505 South Cambridge Drive. And thank you for this platform tonight. We appreciate your time. For the first 20, I'm going to digress for just a second. First 20 years that we lived in our house, we built this home 22 years ago. We're one of the early settlers there and are still there. Our house was referred to as the last house on the left. Literally, when you went down South Cambridge, not the movie, when you went down Cambridge north, you would eventually hit a dead end. So the only option, cars, trucks, vans, fully loaded heavy-duty trucks, ambulances. We had a fire engine once up all the way up to our driveway. We were turnaround central because there was nowhere else to go. So my wife and I came before the Common Council probably 3 or 4 times and pleaded our case. And really we asked for a little mini cul-de-sac or something. And we were assured that someday the road would go through. That took 20 years, and it now goes through. So the problem's been averted, but why am I relating this, and how is it relevant? Those are annoyances and nuisances. They were costly. We had to resurface our driveway for $15,000. Our lateral up to our house got crushed. We had to replace that for $5,000. But it's, not the end of the world. What we're talking about tonight, by contrast, in my opinion, can have catastrophic outcomes for many of us, those of us living at ground zero. So ma'am, I don't know your name, but if you could pop up that thumb drive.
Yep. Do you want this PDF? There's several files.
Yeah, Swamp 1, Swamp 2, Swamp 3, and Swamp 4.
Oh, nope. Not
Not
Christmas
his
files.
You're welcome to show the Christmas card. Very proud of that Christmas card.
Oops.
Has a picture of the backyard.
Let's get these.
I have hard copies too.
Yeah, the computer is confused. They're JPEGs. Should work.
Hey.
There we go. One more. Hold on. Oh. Okay. Yep. So here's Swamp 1.
Okay, there's Swamp 1. That used to be our little fire pit area. We haven't been able to use that in quite some time. As you can see, the swamp has breached, our property line pretty significantly. And the next, it's just going to be a quick progression of
Swamp 2.
that would be, no, you're all the way up to number 4.
This is Swamp 4.
That's fine. It's another continuation of that same area.
And Swamp 3.
There. Now, to Brian's point, you can see the saturation. The water's got nowhere to go, so it just sits there. And when it rains again, then Brian and I are like trauma sandbag buddies. We literally, if you go to the last slide, you'll see where my patio starts.
Is it?
Yeah, right there on the left-hand edge. That'll be 2 sandbag high pile to just keep the water from breaching the patio and ultimately the house. So why now instead of 20 years ago? I'm not sure. I think the water's been rising steadily year by year. But the last 3 or 4 years have been really, really, really bad, like scary bad. So that's kind of where we sit now. And I think there's a solution on the table that we all support. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm old school, hard copy.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Brett Law. I'm at 7517 South Cambridge, so I would live between Pete and between Brian. This photo, though, that I'm showing you is a gentleman who would live next to Brian, who's not here this evening. He for some reason, my house between Brian and Pete is slightly elevated. I don't deal quite the significance of water in my backyard. But I wanted this particular photo here. You can, if you look at it closely, you can see that there's a dog fence that was put up years ago. This gentleman, who's not here this evening, bought this house about 3 years ago. Dan's house, yeah. One of the pictures that you have in the iPad. Yeah. So Rupert and Lynn Coetzee built this house back when Pete alluded to when he built his house. And when they installed this fence, I highly doubt that they installed that fence in water. So I think it just shows the degree, the significance of water rise over the years that continues to occur. I also want to point out, and I think it would be sad if we didn't point this out, that in some of Pete's pictures, the new subdivision that has gone in, that would be to the north of us. So it would be between us and Stonehenge. I'm not sure what they call that subdivision. Yeah, the Oaks Estates. There is, without a shadow of a doubt, with that subdivision going in, just the significance of elevation above our homes, it is going to cause even further water damage or encroachment onto our properties. So I'm not sure if you'll cover that, Greg, but it's absolutely evident in some of Pete's photographs that he showed here this evening. In the distance, you can see those homes going in, and they are higher in elevation. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Tom Huber. These guys are really prepared with photographs and pictures. I didn't think to print this out, but I live at 7565 South Kensington Way, and I am on the west side of the street. I face east, where there's a vacant lot now, which is serving as the de facto drainage for the excess water as water levels rise. And I took this picture, I'll just pass it around. And this is from about a month ago. And as you can see, it's functioning as a drain for higher water levels. Water levels are not really high right now. And I built my house in 2003, so I've lived there about 20 years, and every year the encroachment of the water into the lot across the street from me has gotten worse and worse. I think the worst I've seen in the years I've lived there, and there's water that's supposed to be draining on the east end of our subdivision, but it's also draining through this empty lot, is the water flow was so intense that it couldn't be accommodated by the storm sewer, so the water went over the crown of the road into the storm sewer across the street, and there is a pipe that runs between my lot and my neighbor's lot to the south, and that just carried the water underneath my lot, dumping it into the subdivision west of me, flooding that area as well. And so, this is not just a Windham Hills problem, but it's a greater problem than that because it's affecting our whole area. I actually joined the board several years ago because of my concern with this problem. And I talked to the neighbors and got some information on how it impacted them, so I thought I'd be able to do some more good by being on the board. Peter Schmidt, who's also on the board and is here tonight, and myself have looked at alternatives to help solve this problem. And there is another point of drainage about 3 properties north of me, and there is a big interceptor for water. It's not flowing. The people that live there have their sprinkling system is actually underwater. really strange. And I don't know if they use it or not, but it's a good example of what's happened over time as the water levels don't seem to be going anywhere. I also talked briefly at one point to the Pike and Rock River Conservancy, and they looked at it and were interested in this project. And amongst other solutions they discussed is that there is some problem with percolation, for lack of a better word, because over time sediment does develop on the bottom of a marshland that doesn't properly drain. So, we're facing essentially sediments that I'm not a professional at this, but has caused almost a cement bottom, so the water really doesn't seep as it should. I also called a David Frank landscaping company that did the landscaping for my lot and several other properties I own, and they also said that the water has to go someplace. And right now we have one interceptor that doesn't work because the draining thing is a corrugated piece of plastic about this big, and over time that's filled with tree roots. The neighbors didn't get along that well, so they planted trees so they didn't have to see one another. And so eventually that got clogged up. It doesn't function. And so it's been a snowballing problem. I think the people that live on the east side of this see the brunt of it because they're actually having encroaching damage to their property. I used to live in another house near a 100-year floodplain. There's nothing like water in your basement. And when I built my house, although I wasn't concerned about the problem, I do have 2 sump pumps in my basement because, I'm afraid of water. And I'm high enough, and it doesn't impact me directly, but it impacts all the people I live with. And so I think to solve this problem, we're asking you to take a look at Greg's proposal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
If you want to see the pictures of the flowers I gave to my wife, it's the next slide over.
Here's your phone. And if you want to return the iPad as well. Otherwise, I'll take them home. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in citizen comment period? If not, we'll call it close at 7:26. Thank you to everyone. Do we want to do approval of minutes from our January 24th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then I think since we've got a number of folks here, we can jump to new business. Item D, the NRSE application by Greg Marsaw, unless anyone objects.
No objections.
All right, we'll jump to that item. Okay.
You mind if I come up?
Come on up, sure. I think there's a microphone there, and
Do we have this in this packet? Because I couldn't find this.
The slides.
This picture.
So what this is the locator map that should have been distributed with my staff report. So this item is part of the staff report. The property is located at 7570 South Kensington Way. It's in the subdivision that is just northwest of City Hall on the other side of Loomis. So this large wetland complex is located here, and the lot is adjacent to a wetland complex. So I apologize, I didn't provide a printed copy of the locator map, but it was provided with staff's emailed report. So I can do that in future if that would be helpful.
It would be helpful to me
Yeah.
to understand all of these speakers, where they're at, and situate everything for sure.
Sure. Okay, so I want to provide some context for this because you've heard a lot of discussion about a stormwater drainage pipe. So the Environmental Commission's purview here is to review the natural resource aspects of this and the request overall. So Mr. Marsaw's request is to fill and grade the lot, and there's going to be installation of a stormwater drainage pipe as part of that work. And so it's going to be impacting areas of wetland buffer, and wetland setback. So he provided a survey, which is in the packet materials that were distributed to you. And so this is not a complicated request in the sense that it is a fairly straightforward wetland impact and setback and buffer, but there are layered permits. So Mr. Marceau received a permit for 1,500 square feet of wetland impact for this portion of the wetland, and then later received an exemption for this portion. So for the wetland that was under this permit, city statutes are in force. For the exempted area, we actually don't enforce on areas that are exempted from state and federal regulations. And then the remaining wetland, my mouse is wandered, also has exemptions. So I'll show you a table in a minute. But your evaluation today is the request legitimate? Are the areas that are being impacted, is it clear what's being impacted here? And then what is your recommendation on the impacts being requested? So he has already obtained the necessary permits from the DNR for the 1,500 square feet. So just in terms of what's visually represented there, there's 1,500 square feet of wetland under that permit. The exempted area is 7,702 square feet of wetland. Then on his lot, there are 2,326 remaining square feet of wetland for a total of 11,528 square feet of wetland. And then for the buffer area, there is 2,800 square feet that are part of that permitted area. For the exempted area, we do not enforce our wetland buffer and setbacks, so that is a 0 in this table. And then for what remains, there will be impacts to that as well. So, but that's what's for that remaining area on site. So then the exemption request is for, or the NRSE exception request is for a total impact area, which ultimately, although we're not enforcing on the 7,702 square feet, essentially, it's important to just note that that is part of this discussion, and then the buffer areas for the permit and the remaining impact. So this is a different diagram of this. Just this lot is, there's a lot going on here in terms of the different layers, but diagramming where all of the different impacts will be located, and then the stormwater pipe is going to travel through the lot, I believe, along the property line. And that is not part of your review. So while I understand that there's a lot of discussion about how the stormwater is affecting the neighbors and how they support this grading, et cetera, it's important that that happen for the health of the wetland and for the future of the subdivision, but your review is specific to the impacts to the wetland related to grading and fill. These kinds of essential services are allowed to make impacts, and the evaluation of whether or not it affects the overall stormwater plan of the subdivision is not part of planning's review. It's not part of this review tonight.
I'm sorry, I just have to make a comment on that. My opening statement said in 2009, Mr. Marceau was asked to dig a trench through the middle of his property to relieve the water level. So I believe that this drainage pipe is part and parcel because he won't develop this land without having a way to not make that water issue worse.
That's correct, but what I'm saying is that planning, and this commission do not have a review over whether or not the stormwater itself has been done correctly. So their review is over the impacts to the wetland. So whether or not that's an appropriate response, and engineering has signed off on this. This is something that I should back up and say that.
My comment is that anything that happens to that piece of land without a drainage pipe makes it worse. Because it is a drain right now. A bad drain, but it is draining water, and you saw that in the photographs I gave.
That is not part of this review. So they are here to, it is part of the consideration of the discussion, but it is not something that they have if I can't answer questions about how the stormwater is going to be affected by the installation of the pipe or not. And this body doesn't review that. So the request is appropriate so that the impacts to the natural resources can be made, but they do not have review over the stormwater. So just to be very clear, and engineering has said that this is the desirable approach to solve this problem, and then because of the grading to use the residential lot according to the zoning, that your review is also necessary in that context. But again, I can't answer questions about whether or not the stormwater design is appropriate. Engineering believes that it is, and we're here to finalize the natural resource part of it. So, in general, like the appropriateness of the request is pretty straightforward. They've gotten the necessary permits. Mr. Marceau has provided the requested information. There is one issue with the delineation reports. They are out of date, and you will have to provide updated wetland delineation reports. Because of the exemption status on this, all of the wetland could potentially have been exempted at some point, but once you complete your wetland delineations, again, there's a 5-year time limit on how long we can accept those for, so that's under the code. You will have to provide an updated wetland delineation report. And then I don't have my standards and findings in front of me. Here we go. What's the other one? And then we do recommend placing boulders or other markers at the wetland boundary in order to note that that is the boundary of the wetland once that delineation is complete. So conservation signage is a standard requirement now, and going forward we recommend that so that people don't mow into the wetland itself, that kind of thing. So your standards, findings, and decision, the Commission's recommendation on what will become the Common Council's standards, findings, and decision reflects some additional conditions of approval, the updated and confirmed wetland delineation report, the placement of boulders, and then Mr. Marceau has already provided a draft easement for this, which I have yet to review, but would require Common Council approval, and it's not something this Commission has a review over, as we've discussed in the past, but it would reflect the boundary of the wetland and what is to be protected, and also marked with boulders. So the applicant has been very thorough and is here to answer questions if you have them. So.
Hi. As she said, I'm Greg Marceau, the property owner on this, and we're in front of you guys tonight and just trying to get this, what I'm going to say is an obvious problem with the sub. Can you guys hear me okay?
Absolutely.
I can't tell if I'm talking into this or not.
You're good.
There we go.
Am I turned on? That sounds more like I'm.
Yeah.
Although we're not that far away and that many people in here.
But there is a recording. So
Yep.
you
So-
want to listen in the future.
This has been a subdivision issue, which I think you can tell the intensity and the concern that the neighbors have in the subdivision. My background with this, I started working for Mark Karstensen, the developer, back in the late 90s. And if I didn't tell you guys, I framed your house, Pete, and yours, Brett, back in the day. I was on the framing crew when those houses were built. And if I recall correctly, one of yours, too, was done in the spring, and we drove our 24,000-pound forklift all through that backyard, and it wouldn't sink in. If I did that today, I think the lift would just disappear. So it is definitely worse than it was years ago. I worked for him up until 2011 when I bought the company from Mark and ran it up until 2019 when I decided to pack up and move to Ohio where my wife was from. We decided to move out there. This has been an issue for a long time. I bought the property back from the original purchaser that had this back in the 90s that Mark had developed and sold it to. The daughter of the woman who owned it took over her estate, said, Mom, you own 5 lots around town. You're 92 years old. You're not going to build 5 houses, more or less one. Let's sell it. She called me. I bought it back. At the time, this was still known as a problem, and I had honestly completely forgot that in 2009, when I was the site superintendent on the Wyndham Village project for Karstensen, where Target is over there, the city actually came and got me, said, hey, we got a problem. These transformers are about to flood and explode in these people's yards back on Cambridge. We need a bulldozer. Can you help us out? So we put a bulldozer on a trailer, drove it right over, cut a swale through this property to drain as an emergency overflow. When they came back to me in probably, I think it was around 2015 to buy it back, I completely forgot about that. 2015, I was in the middle.
This property,
Yeah.
where did you put a swale?
If you look, and I was going to walk you through, look at Exhibit 6 in that packet I put together. And when I ordered 20 of these binders, I should have ordered a bigger binder, but I didn't think I'd have this much paperwork to put together in them, or it's going to fill them up. So if you look at Exhibit 6, you can see, and I highlighted, it's the same photo, I just highlighted the swale on the bottom half of that photo. You can see where that property is draining. And I didn't go back. After they drained the level down, the city was going to go back and fill that swale back in. I don't think it was ever filled back in, at least properly back to the grades it was prior. So as one of the residents spoke to, this property's been acting as an overflow for that pond since 2009. When I had purchased it, the city planner at the time said, hey, this was developed prior to the wetland buffer and the setbacks that you guys had, so the city doesn't have any, because it's not going to be a concern. You're going to have to check with the DNR. You can't fill if it has become a wetland, but it's not going to be a city issue. Since then, he's no longer here, so that's why I sit before you this evening. But this has been acting as that problem. As these guys said, it's gotten worse over the years. And my understanding is over the years, sediment gets in these ponds, vegetation continues to grow and takes up space, and this wetland has less holding capacity than it used to. Hence why it's getting worse every year as the vegetation continues to get worse in there.
Things get developed around it, and there's less place for more water to go. So, yeah.
And I think that's part of it.
Probably a big part.
Yeah. And this is the last vacant house around that, as these guys said. Oaks Estates is doing their thing on the north side. City engineering staff has said that their engineering review did not put any more stormwater towards this. Looking at the grades, it's hard to actually visualize that and picture that being true. But there's clearly a subdivision issue here. So I spent, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 years working with the engineering department trying to come up with a solution to this. And see, these guys, I built a lot of their homes. They're friends of mine. I told them when I bought this, like, listen, if I build on this, it's going to flood every one of you. And I'm not going to do that to you. We need to solve this problem. I'm not going to sell the lot or build on it until we come up with a solution. So working through the city engineering, and Grafe is the engineering company we worked with staff. We looked at going, through your alternative analysis for this. Could we go north, south, east, west? Is there any other options? And we looked at all. And the city, the hard part with it, the plans that the city had for their infrastructure didn't go back to the 90s. So the city engineering couldn't say, hey, if we dump this water into this pipe, is it going to cause any other issues? And I'm sure, I don't know, I was born here and raised here in Franklin, did a lot of work here. There's a lot of drainage issues in subdivisions in the city of Franklin. So and the staff was aware of this. We didn't want to cause any issues for anybody else. So I basically hired these guys. We as-built the storm sewer from this property west, north, into the pond, the big one north on the north side of Wolfville Road and east of Highway 100. That we as-built the whole thing to go through it, figure out how big it was, can it handle the capacity, what can you do it? So we did that, and then the city engineering's like, well, maybe we're better off going to the east and taking it to Loomis Road. So then we hired those guys again. We as-built all the storm sewer from this property all the way east, almost up to Rawson Avenue where it comes out, where that vacant parcel is on the other side. No, then they decided, no, let's not do that. The water now goes west and eventually ends up in the big pond on Wolfville Highway 100. So we looked at that, then that made the most sense. So as your alternative analysis, this was the only really viable. They wanted to keep the water going the same direction. We wanted to do this. We looked at going south through the other ponds in Windham Hills and then back out to Loomis where it actually goes south instead of going the other way and going north on Loomis. And between city staff engineering wise and their consulting engineer, this was the most viable way this is the best way to control that water level. So we've looked at all and it just so happened at the time this lot was draining the water. It makes sense to go through this. The other drain that some of the other gentlemen alluded to, there's a small 6-inch corrugated pipe that was put in 2 or 3 lots north. Nobody knows how it got there. The city engineers at the time, Mr. Romeis and Mr. Bennett, if you guys remember those guys, they don't know how it got there. They were the engineers at the time when this got approved. Once it was discovered, the city staff actually went out and maintained the inlet side of this, which is a 6-inch pipe. Just that's it. There's no inlet structure or anything around it. They did it for quite a few years until, for some reason, they decided they couldn't do it anymore, and they turned it over to the homeowners association. And the homeowners association has then been trying to maintain that 6-inch pipe. But as you can't drain a 9-acre wetland through a 6-inch pipe. It doesn't. It's a swimming pool through a straw, as I alluded to in my narrative. It just doesn't work. So we came in, we've got an alternative that will solve this problem. And then as it came up kind of at the end, well, engineering approved it. Like, great, I've been 3 or 4 years into this. Let's give me the permit. Let's put the pipe in. Well, you better check with planning to make sure that there's no issues with this. And that's when this came up that, hey, you are impacting. In order to put that pipe in on the north property line, you have to fill up to the edge of the wetland. And that's where initially it came back, okay, we need permission to do that from you guys to solve the problem. And then the other part of my request is I want to be able to fill this parcel like all the other neighbors have and build a house on it as it's intended to do. So we're asking for your permission or I don't know if permission's the right term, their approval, recommendation for approval to be able to fill not to the wetland. And as you alluded to, or you can see, the original parcel had that 1,300 feet of wetlands on the plat. Is the yellow that's up there. Through my workings with the DNR and the Army Corps, we agreed to leave that additional 1,000 square feet of wetland on the parcel. And let me just find if you flip to attachment 11 in your book, it kind of shows just an aerial photo with a line drawn in there showing the original 1,300 feet, then the revised fill limit of the additional 1,000 feet that were planned, and I've agreed to leave and put in conservation easement, which pretty much matches, as you can see, the fill line of the neighbors on both sides. So where they've had their yards filled in, I wanted to be able to do the same as what they did on the sides. And that edge of that revised fill limit is the edge of what is considered now the edge of the wetland from DNR standards that we'll put the pipe up to. And it would control the water level with a 12-inch concrete pipe as you overflow into the city storm. If that makes sense. Have you guys reviewed this? Do you want me to walk through this whole thing? No.
No.
I mean, I could spend till 11 o'clock if you guys want me to go through the great detail of this.
I do have a couple questions.
Certainly.
So the pipe that engineering's approved, where is that on? Is that, you said it's along the property border here?
It's on the north property line. It's a little hard to see, but let's look at, I think, attachment 10. If you open that up, you can see the storm sewer line is drawn. That's the plan showing the city storm line. So it runs in Kensington by the K and E in Kensington is the existing storm sewer inlet. It would run north along the right-of-way and then run right along the north side of this property line. And then the intent is to I will give the HOA a 10-foot easement for maintenance. The HOA will own the pipe, and they will have the easement to maintain that pipe, and that'll get a part of the deeded part of the property.
Which way is the flow? Towards this Kensington way?
Yes.
So it's removing water from
Yeah, so the inlet,
wetland and bringing it into a stormwater?
correct, where the inlet elevation is 214.15 on the right side of the plan, and it jumps into the city storm at 208.43. So you've got 6 feet of pitch on that pipe, give or take. and there was one of your comments that there may have been a discrepancy on some of these plans. The Grave plan may have tweaked a number or something different. The plan that engineering approved is the one that I'm asking to go through. So if something is different between these blueprints, I think we did too. But the Grave plan, which shows the same path, it may have a 100th or a 10th of an elevation difference somewhere on it. That is what I'm planning putting in what the city engineering has approved.
Okay. And so before we get to what we're here to make recommendations on, am I correct in understanding or thinking that this pipe that's already been approved by city engineering is going to solve the issues that we've heard from all of the citizen comments tonight? That's the purpose of that pipe.
Correct. And through the exhaustive, I'm going to say, work with the DNR and the city staff, we reestablished and confirmed with the DNR what the original design elevation, the normal water level of the wetland was. And that is that 214.15. That's on here, and the DNR concurred with it, and that's why we set the inlet elevation the way we did. So it would restore the water. So what their yards looked like 20 years ago, where the normal water level was, it'll restore it back to that the original water level.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
How confident do you feel that this will solve everyone's issue, not just this will take up 80% of the issues will go away, but I worry for the but-for.
Mm-hmm.
If, one property you're not seeing because of the grading or some other externality that's not allowing that water to flow out, and they're kind of stuck with that encroachment of that water, what's the next step?
When we initially looked at this and figured out, we looked at the approved surveys for all other houses as to where the normal water. I say everyone, or not everyone, but majority of them have a little bit of plotted wetland on their backyard. That you can even, not on this map.
All the pictures show
there is some in there, and it's gotten worse over the years. And what this does is we're going back to hitting that normal water level.
Okay.
And I think I've made this clear. Just so I want to make sure everyone's clear. Normal water level. If we get 12 inches of rain in 12 hours, it's going to go up. But right now, you're draining 13 acres through a pipe this big, and we're putting in a 12-inch concrete pipe that will drain it much quicker. I can't tell you, hey, it took 3.5 days to drain that before, and now it's going to take 3 hours or 3.5 hours.
Right, aren't you also sinking the pipe a little deeper?
Correct. Well, we're setting it back to what the normal water level, the design elevation. We can't lower the wetland from the way it was originally designed. It will. Your backyard could get some water, but it should drain in a much
more
hours,
efficiently.
not weeks, that type of thing as we go through it.
Okay.
I'll say, we understand that. We know that things have changed in the wetland. There's sediment that's gone in there. There's more foliage that's around it, and there's different conditions in the environment. So there will certainly be conditions where there's a lot of water that comes fast. Our problem today is the water doesn't dissipate. It takes a trickle to get it going.
And I'm just taking a lot of those comments as part of this because I don't want there to be a level of expectation, as to your point of where, hey, like what we got last night, and what the heck, it's still sitting out there, as opposed to, to your point, sir, is that it will drain at a much more efficiency. I think is really the key in all this is that it's able to efficiently drain properly off of the properties and away from all the owner homes. If I'm reading this right.
Yep, and that was a big part of with the engineering staff review is, okay, we know the city's aware there's a problem. If we're going to do so, is this going to solve it? Should it be an 8-inch pipe, a 12-inch pipe, a 20-inch pipe? And that was all part of the review that they did. And decided that this is adequate. You know, the way I've equated it to these guys, you turn on your kitchen faucet, the sink doesn't fill up with water, right? The drain can handle the flow under a normal event. You dump a big bucket, a big pot in your kitchen sink, it's going to fill up for a few seconds, but then it drains right back down. It's not. It doesn't take the time. That same sort of thing will happen. And we never had it's hard to put an analysis together on how exactly long that'll take to go through it. But if it was designed and built today, that piping that we're proposing is an adequate overflow for those conditions. So I guess the long answer, yes, we're confident it's going to solve that problem under the normal conditions.
I just want to salute that was a very thoughtful question, and I appreciate how you framed it. And I can't speak for these guys, but I would just say there's an old saying, it's hard to fall out of a hole. Anything is going to be an improvement of what we have now.
Yeah, and I would just add, between Pete, I, and then Dan, the pictures you saw, we are certainly the low end of where the water comes in. And we fully support this and understand the level our expectations, or set our expectations. But, well, talk about properties impacted. Most of the properties impacted the most are represented in the group today. So.
And then finally, my last other kind of curiosity about this is when you talk about the 5-year delineation as far as anything, what are possible returns of issue with other developments in surrounding this area where that water, it has to go someplace, right? And where if you kind of forcing it into that corridor and all of a sudden, 12 inches in 2024 remedies a lot of the issues that have been going on for, as was told to us, for several years. We're now all of a sudden, okay, that 12 inches isn't enough in 2035, for example, because of other growth in that area.
No, and thank you you brought up 2 points. That the first one, the delineation, since the original delineation has expired, I've reached out, we've talked to the DNR, I've rehired the original assured delineator that did the wetland, and they are working on it. And I don't have an exact answer yet, other than, yeah, we should, the DNR is like, yeah, we should be able to do that. That doesn't sound impossible. We just they're working through that process to get those updated on the confirmation of the delineation. And along with that, then, one of those permits actually expired as well, that they're updating that. And looking at it, they don't foresee a problem, but you guys being in the positions you're in, I'm sure you've worked with the DNR enough that nothing happens super quickly. Then the other side of it, is it going to be enough as the development continues? So Grafe is one of the approved third-party reviewers of any of the civil engineering stuff that happens in the city of Franklin. Grafe didn't do the storm design for the Oak subdivision north of us, but they did do the review on it on the city's behalf. And part of their stormwater review for this pipe and sizing this pipe was looking at that development, where the water was going from that, and that there's no other development that can happen if the pond is the high end and the one on Highway 100 and Wolfville is the low end. Everything is filled in here in between.
Okay.
So there's no other. Yeah, this is the last
So it's
lot.
kind of landlocked.
Yep. Yeah, there's nothing else. Anything east side of Loomis, any of that, everything else goes a different direction.
Okay.
So there isn't anything else that could be added to this. But it was part of the thorough review we did.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I do agree. If they have, assuming they have done all the calculations, but if there is a back pressure built up because of the other water additions, that can be a problem. So at the point of request, if a larger pipe is suitable, maybe that should be considered.
And attachment 13 in your packet is I'm going to call it the executive summary of their Graves stormwater review. The entire, I think I delete the 100 pages of calculations and math that went along with this. I didn't attach, honestly, because I didn't want to print that many pages for you guys. If you do want to see that, the city does have the copy that goes with it. But they included the entire, if you just look at the kind of the end of their executive summary. They don't have them where you can see my notes in red. They did the entire Oaks Estate stormwater report was part of their review because they had already done it, and they looked at the existing HydroCAD report, the proposed HydroCAD report. You know that they reviewed everything and they sized that pipe accordingly.
So the thing that, I'm sorry, did you want to?
Nope, go ahead.
The thing that I'm struggling with a little bit is the pipe's not something that we have any say over, although it influences. Or so you're coming here, I guess you're coming here asking for us to make recommendations for you to grade and fill a wetland area. And the public comment that we've heard is saying the problem that we have is flooding because we don't have anywhere for our water to go. So it's kind of counterintuitive, and I understand there's a pipe going to be added, but that's supposed to address some of that. I'm just wondering if you can speak to that conundrum.
Understood.
Okay.
So as we went through all this, so in order to get the pipe, so what we're proposing and what the engineering staff and Grafe had come up with, the best solution, we're going to put a overflow pipe with just a typical, kind of flared end section on it, where that end of that pipe is going to sit right up against the wetland at the design elevation of that wetland. So in order to do that, it's basically sitting on grade right now with the 12-inch pipe. So in order to bury that pipe, we have to fill the wetland fill within the buffer and the setback.
So the fill is not to be able to build the house in the wetland area?
No one's trying to build. The wetland area will remain wetland. We're not trying to touch any wetlands. I want to fill within the buffer and the setback of the wetland. Not touching any.
In the buffer.
Yeah, just the buffer. Yeah, I'm not trying to fill any wetlands.
But you're trying to fill a buffer.
With the exception of the 1,500 feet on the far, kind of that just to the right of the blue, that original 1,500 feet that we have permitted from the DNR to fill.
Okay. So then you are filling some wetland. It's
in the middle of
allowed,
that property.
And you are filling wetland buffer.
And within the setback, which I think is already permitted, if I recall. So I want to be able to fill in up to the in my mind, since I already had I've got a permit from the DNR to fill 1,500. I got the rest exempted as being that they're not wetlands. So in my mind, I wanted to fill up to what now is the wetland boundary, which we did conserve another 1,000 square feet from what was originally planted on that map, if you can see it. Does that make sense?
I understood what you said. I don't know that it makes sense to me to say let's add more and put more building in an area we're already having problems with.
Yeah, so the original 1,300 feet that was plotted on the subdivision was this 1,300 feet there. I've agreed to leave another 1,000 square feet because over the years, and with that swale being cut in, not filled, that wetland has creeped out to here. So the first permit we got was getting filled to fill this first 1,500 feet, which took it from there back to about here. Then I got the balance of that exempted to 7,700, which took shows those backyards being filled to that. And back when that subdivision was developed in the early 90s, it was not uncommon that the developers would leave the lot 2 or 3 feet lower than final grade, so when you dug your basement, you didn't have to haul all the dirt out. You dug it, that you filled your yard in, and the lot's essentially balanced at the time. And since the neighbors have all, and this is the only lot that hasn't been built on, so everyone else got to balance their lot, fill it in, get the yard back to proposed grades. And that's what I want to do with this. I just want to take it back to the way it was originally plotted and approved to be able to fill it in. If that makes sense.
It makes sense. I guess
Does that answer your question? I know it's
somewhat. I mean, so the other pieces I'm trying to attach here are in 2019. That was attachment 15 here. That's when the Army Corps approved the determination, and that's expired after 5 years. And they reserved the right to review and revise the determination depending on the changing site conditions and other off-site activities that have happened since this was granted in 2019. Well, it's 2024.
This one, there's 2 different Army Corps concurrences in here. The one that, the attachment 15.
Because I'm looking at 2019. Where am I not?
If we want to look at, just to try to walk through all of those, which probably is a good idea.
I just want to see the most current one then. That's what I'm looking at. It says January 3rd, 2019.
So that one, the attachment 15, that is basically going along with after the page prior to it, attachment 14, is the exemption for the 7,700 feet. The one from January 3rd, 19, concurred with that. And in second paragraph on that one just said there are no water in that area that they would have jurisdiction over. If you read the second paragraph of the attachment 15.
But attachment 14 is from an earlier date.
The attachment 14 is the Wisconsin DNR one. And 15 is the Army Corps agreeing with that, or that went along with that one.
So a couple of things.
Clarify.
The permitting process, so we can't supersede another entity's permitting. So if they decide that those permits are no longer valid, that is a possibility, or want to change the scope of them. But the permanence of the standards, findings, and decision, this ultimate decision would be for whatever it is that is the outcome in terms of the wetland buffer and setback. So it's a permanent approval, whereas they do that on more of an ongoing basis. But we can't supersede them. So,
I'm not wanting to supersede it, but like you're asking us to make a recommendation based on information that's being currently updated and reviewed.
That's very common with these applications. So we get requests that the permits are in play. So if that's something, there's always a requirement that the other permits from other jurisdictions be finalized before a building permit is issued. And I do want to clarify, the wetland delineation is what's expired. So Mr. Marceau had a naturalist produce a wetland delineation report, which received a confirmation, and the confirmation is in your packet. That's from 2016, and it expired in 2021. So he needs to redo that to meet the local requirements. But the discussion today is, does this meet the requirements of our local ordinances? And one of them is that those other jurisdictions approve the work that's being done. So if that's a concern, please know that it's not something we can't supersede them. So
what you're saying is we can still make our recommendations, whatever they might be, but it could still all change once these other authorities come in. So that's where I'm like, I don't know how we make a decision.
What I would ask is anything decision on your end would be contingent upon getting these updated and approved.
That is how this process works. So the Common Council takes a decision. It's called a standards, findings, and decision. It's not identical to the recommendation that you make, but the scope of it is pretty similar. There are standard conditions on all of these approvals, and as with any other, because this is essentially a zoning variance, this is a variance of the design standards, which have the natural resource protection standards under them in our ordinances. So they're asking you for a variance of those requirements up to a certain amount. So if it comes back and there is if it exceeds, then he needs to ask for a significantly larger amount of impacts as a result of something that changes under those, under the delineation report or under the other permits. We might have to repeat this process, but typically if something is less than, then it's whatever, you can go up to the point of the approval. So that's why we took the time to be very clear about asking for the buffer, asking for the setback, asking for all of the wetland that would be encompassed by the permits here, so that he's covered, basically. So the goal here is to make sure that the lot meets the standards of the zoning for this. So, but again, you can't supersede those other agencies. So I also want to note, because I know I don't want to mix things up here, but we've talked a lot about flooding. This property is not in a FEMA designated floodplain. So the water overflow that is happening is not considered like flooding related to a river or other floodway where there's moving water. It's not in one of those floodplains. So specifically wetland impacts.
Okay. Good. One remaining question I had, the vegetation, you're going to be doing grading and filling. Could you show on that plot? I think I read somewhere you're just planning to do turf grass?
The idea would be to fill it in so that people would have a normal, backyard like the neighbors. After their recommendation, I told them I'm fine with, would be doing, a boulder or something to create a hard edge up against that existing wetland. You mentioned boulders. In my head, that's like, like cobbles or smaller, not like pea gravel or something, but like a smaller, like landscape rock or a little bigger than that. Would be to do a border like, whatever it would need to be a couple feet or 5 feet wide up against that, what I'm calling the new shoreline edge, so that and get that graded to where it needs to be, so that when this would get filled in, once that when you dig the basement, you finish filling in the rest of it, it would have that hard edge up against the wetlands, would be there established, and that would be part of the engineering process review of a building permit when it came in, to make sure that that's noted, nothing comes up against it. So my hope was to be able to fill it in, whoever buys it, to be able to fill it in like the neighbors did so they could have a normal backyard. I would imagine that would be grass, but I don't have, I haven't sold the property yet or figured out who's going to build on it to get that determined.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I guess we would encourage, to the extent, but it's probably out of your control, using native type plantings, not necessarily putting in more mowable turf, but especially with all the wetland issues and water runoff and issues that are going on, the native plants have a much deeper root structure and it would be much better for areas that have water issues.
And that makes sense to me. But once that's filled in, and you have, right now the water comes over that because it's the low point on the dam. And once that's filled in, and you've put a pipe in to alleviate the water, and but you're not affecting the wetland proper, you're not having any water, like as you mentioned, water concerns or water issues, or you're not trying to absorb anything because your yard's higher than what that water level would be. I'm open. I'm open to that idea. I just don't know if I don't know how I would enforce that,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Right. No, perfectly understandable. It's just something that other organizations have been trying to promote, and we've also been, to the extent we can, spread the information to folks and try and encourage native type plantings and whatnot.
If there's a way to put that into the documents or the approval, not everyone wants to mow every square inch of your yard. They may want that or be able to look at that as a recommendation that they'd be encouraged to do something more of a native planting in that back as opposed to turf grass. I don't know how that information. I mean, I'll give you my word on trying to do what I can to do it.
No,
you know what I mean? I just don't know how you'd do anything besides encourage it. And if there's a write-up of some sort you have that would explain better than I could probably explain it to someone verbally, I'd be happy to, kind of put that in the documents, if you will.
Funnily enough.
You have one.
It's literally right here.
Agenda item.
Yeah. Typically, though, we do recommend, so you are requesting as part of your NRSC that the setback also be exempted. If you were not making that request, you would be required to restore it with an agricole or other pond mix of native species for that. I guess it's upland. This is not my area of expertise, but not the wet plants, but the next step.
Sure.
And that kind of native planting is something this commission is very concerned with, but it's not required as part of this request. He's asking to be exempted from that. I will incorporate into my report to Plan Commission that recommendation that we encourage native plantings in the backyard. Is that so?
Yeah, we encourage it.
Understood.
But we're not mandating it. So otherwise, Marion, I think you've laid out in the staff memo the Environmental Commission recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you, in your email packet, you would have received your draft recommendation. At your desks, you have some slight changes to this from the chair that are highlighted for clarity's sake. And then the recommended conditions of approval, the recommendations set forth here incorporated herein. You recommend approval. I have approval or denial because sometimes that is the recommendation. But so you will have to take a motion about that. And then the recommended conditions of approval, the updated wetland delineation report, signage, boulders. This is something that is whatever makes sense to do aesthetically. It's a condition that we're now recommending and will be part of the new UDO is that always be present, or a fence could be something you could consider. You're not a fan of that idea.
No one else has.
Yeah.
I mean, a fence isn't gonna. I think a boulder, almost call it shoreline beach edge, would be more appropriate. Yeah, hardscaping.
Yep.
That most likely someone isn't going to take out of there if you put it in. You make it look nice. I don't know. Granted, someone can do anything, but to me that would be I wouldn't want to block the view of the wetland. Or conservancy, as I've always been taught. It was, as I was taught to call it, it's not a wetland. Or it's a wetland conservancy. To not block that, but put in some sort of a hardscape that'd be completed when someone builds, and I would think they're less likely to take it out or alter it at that point.
And then the conservation easement is the final piece. So, and as I said, that's already been submitted. It's a standard document, a template from the city with limitations on basically you can't fill or grade. So it's in some ways reiterating the requirements of the UDO, but also just clarifying that easement is given to the city for just the wetland in this case. So.
And it's in there as attachment 21.
Yep.
And I probably need an attorney to fill this out, and I filled it out. And there's a lot of it talking about the mortgage holder and that end of it. Well, there is none.
You can just put none. We can talk about that later.
I wasn't sure how to prove that.
The text of the template, unless there is a condition in this process, is not to be altered.
Gotcha.
So obviously, if there's no mortgage holder, we take that out, et cetera. But that will only change if the NRSE indicates that that's
Okay.
part of the process. So,
All right.
Motion to approve the exception based on the revised draft that was provided by staff.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, and we'll do a roll call vote on this.
Chair Horn,
Aye.
Vice Chair Seraphin,
Aye.
Alderman Craig,
Aye.
Secretary.
Secretary. What do I for this motion to?
Okay, motion passes. Thank you for all of the comments, the information.
Thank you, guys. This is
Good luck
big
in the
step for
continuing
everybody.
process.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
and so the folks in the room are aware this item will next be heard at Plan Commission. The date of which escapes me at the moment, but I believe it's yes, it's the 7th. And it is a public hearing at that meeting, so there will be a public hearing that's announced in the meeting, and then a specific time set aside to make comments for the public hearing, but there will not be a citizen comment period at that meeting, so this commentary, no, you should, if you want to make comments, you should, and then you must make them during the public comment period. So, because there won't be,
No, it's next
it's
Thursday.
next Thursday, yeah.
Right here at 6 o'clock.
So.
No, we can't.
In the simplest terms, so Mr. Marceau has obtained permits for impacts to wetlands that are currently on the property. There's a local process to also achieve that approval because we have local natural resource protection standards for wetlands and all water resources. So what this is a recommendation on ultimately the Common Council's decision whether or not they want to allow for that variance or for those impacts under our local ordinances. So. Mr. Marceau will have to make sure that his permits he obtains or reinstates the permits from other agencies. So we only have control over what's called the Unified Development Ordinance. It's the city's zoning and design ordinance just for Franklin. And then the federal and state government have review over natural resources as well, frequently bodies of water. So in this case, the Army Corps and DNR have reviewed it and said, here's the kinds of permits and allowances that we will make, but some of them need to be updated.
Does that clear it? Or not?
It's one of the steps.
I'll take 1 minute and try it again.
Sure.
Initially, it started, I hired I had to go out and determine
Next time?
where is the
Next
wetland
meeting?
on the property. So I hired a delineator to go out and mark.
I don't
You know, this is wetland, this isn't, we determine where it is.
Thank
They
you.
don't have to be reproduced
I
for
guess the
another
initial
meeting.
comment, what they did was, when I told them, hey, I think this is how much wetlands on the property.
I think it's nice. I personally,
They said, yep, we agree.
oh, you don't have to have one for everybody, but we pass it down. Yeah.
So that's what's expired.
Yeah.
I think that there are some where other commissions may not need that because of what the scope of what you're asking for may just hear what you're saying and say like, this makes sense. Where this body is more concerned about the environmental impact for it, may not be a thing where Plan Commission will have, where they look at that and say like, oh, okay, well.
But I would also say it's helpful for them to see
Yep.
the homeowner, to demonstrate what you're talking about.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. like to continue our meeting, so. Please do.
Thank you all again.
Yep.
Kicking you out.
You can hang around if you want to listen to everything else.
They are riveting.
Some parts of it are.
Okay, let's go back to item 4, unfinished business, review of articles for City of Franklin newsletter. Okay, anybody come up with any drafts? We just got the current newsletter, so we've got another month or two to come up with some proposed articles. Item B, Common Council referral of NOMO May to the environment.
Unfinished, I'm sorry,
Oh.
unfinished business, we say no action.
No action on A, right, review of articles.
The only thing I would like to ask for that is, what is the due date for the next newsletter?
I don't have it yet, so there hasn't been like a published list. It's quarterly, and so I'm just
Okay.
coordinating with the administrator's office.
Okay, that's fine.
If we'd have them by next meeting, we
Next
could
meeting,
look
we'd be
at them.
fine,
Yep.
okay.
May even stretch to the following,
thank
but
you. Yeah.
probably not. Okay, item B, the NOMO May item went to Common Council.
Yep, so in your packet, you should have received a copy of the council action sheet that Alderman Craig and the other aldermen reviewed at their February 21st meeting. So there were a number of questions about, let me see if I can pull up my notes for this, because I'm realizing they're elsewhere in my binder. So just in general, they were, had mixed feelings about the recommendations because there is a burden that would be placed on DPW to implement this, but they did adopt a motion to direct Public Works to review the recommended mowing practices for incorporation into maintenance. So I can have another chat with the city engineer about how that might work, but there are a limited number of properties that native mowing practices would be appropriate for. Victory Creek is probably the major one that we all know. And then as we go forward with development of Water Tower Park and of the Southwest Park, that would also be an appropriate time to have a conversation about, native plantings and that kind of thing. So if you give me a second to find my notes, so February 21st. I did take notes, although I didn't leave them downstairs. Oh, here we go. So there was a concern, about just the parks looking messy. But they did adopt the motion, and then the other note that I have here is that Alderwoman Eichmann asked that the information actually be included in the newsletter so that residents have the information so that they can incorporate that into their home practices if they like. So if that's something you're interested in doing, what they received in their packet was just that page 97. And then I did make available, the whole thing is available for DPW to look at if they want to, but page 97 is a very succinct, let me hand it to you.
So they're concerned the parks would look messy
if we didn't
didn't.
mow consistently in the sort of turf grass areas. So they were.
And that to me is an education thing. It's a completely, we have conditioned ourselves to think I have a mowed lawn that looks nice and neat and tidy. And so I think that's an educational thing that we have to make. And the thing that comes to my head is find some photos of larger natural areas that do not practice turf mowing, but allow the grass to grow, and then allow native vegetation if you're planting stuff. and then you can have a path mowed through it to walk or whatever. This is a pretty common practice anymore because you save, it's not just natural resource. You're not paying somebody to mow. You're not putting gas in a mower. You're not, it's better for pollinators. I mean, there's so many. So I guess I feel like the one thing this commission should aim to do is help educate our planning commission on, when we hear a comment like that, this is messy. We have to kind of, common council. Yeah, I guess, we have to, I would like to figure out how we could educate them about, because we want to step beyond those kinds of comments to really deal with, not that it's not a valid thing, but I don't know if I'm expressing myself very well, but I feel like if that's the level of concern that we have, then the answer should be yes, let's not mow. If that's what we're worried about is not messy. But that's not where we're at. We're at dealing with somebody who thinks it looks messy, so how do we educate them about, no, it doesn't look messy at all. And in fact, I would argue the opposite, that it looks much more beautiful when you let things return to a more natural, wild state than just mow it in a big manicured grass. So that's
I think part of it is, I think as we look at the agenda and look further down, where the discussion point of where it's about the parks. And if we're able to have those conversations with the Parks Commission and kind of where it's not just one voice of advocacy, that if the parks also buys into that concept and says, yeah, that does make sense at Victory Creek or wherever, where this doesn't look messy, it has more, it is as it, as a park should be, is more natural sort of presentation, then it's not just the Environmental Commission that's making this recommendation, it's parks, it's environmental, and then that it has more of a heft to it because it's not just one voice, it's multiple voices coming forward and saying this is what we, not just we as our body here, but we, our body, another commission, another grouping, other citizens advocate for this sort of new practice and this sort of belief system as to how day-to-day life should operate during the spring and the summertime. I think that's where, to your point of wanting to advocate more and educate more, I think doing that in a smaller settings with other smaller boards and commissions, I think that would bear more fruit than taking that straight up to the council itself.
I agree.
I did include in your packet, because that comment, I hear where you're coming from. And this is a resource this is a free, I've used this for a long time as an education tool because when this issue gets presented to me, it's a question of some people have an expectation of like a landscaped environment, especially in residential yards, which is what this is really good for. But this resource is, I'm going to just hand it to you. I did include the PDF of that. That's a free online book that has been published by I think it's the Lee Gap. I'm not familiar with the group, but it's online. It's something that you could link to. It's not appropriate to provide printed copies because it's pretty large, but
this is in our email packet?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think I put a link to it there too because I printed it out so that I could hand it to you.
Yeah, I appreciate just being able to see what you're talking about.
It's a really good, just like approachable tool for this because I think some people are intimidated by the idea
There's a
that
social stigma as far as how everything looks.
Well, but that's also so some of this is like maybe they're not familiar with the seasonality of things. Maybe they're not familiar with like a meadow that doesn't have like groomed areas or groupings of individual plants.
Sure.
And so that's as we're talking about, they wanted more information. The Common Council wanted more information about landscaping recommendations for residential properties, and this is a resource that I have used for a decade now when doing this kind of education because it's very approachable and very clear.
Did you provide that to them, or are you asking us to?
I gave it to you
say
because
that we should provide that to them.
Yeah, to look at if you want to make a recommendation about it. If there's other resources that you recommend, but like I said, this one is one that I'm familiar with that I thought you might like. So
I would be all for that.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I didn't know if there was any other resources that we wanted to.
I mean, the more the merrier.
Yeah, there probably are. I think I don't know. Does Milwaukee County Extension? They should have resources for water garden, natural landscaping.
MMSD does. They have their native plant sales going on right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Root Pike's website has a native.
So there's a lot of good resources. The reason I bring up the county extension is that's all, University of Wisconsin, our land grant university backed research and data. So it's vetted. It's not just saying if you put these 5 perennials in next to your downspout, it'll reduce water. Like if they're going to say that's vetted material through the university. So it's reliable. I think that is too. And I think MSDS is too. I'm not saying they're not, but maybe I could see if they have anything. It should be on their website.
Yeah, MMSD's, if you Google their plant sale, it's happening right now because they actually do like package sales for rain gardens, basically, of native plants. So they sell out quickly.
Yes, they do.
And Weir Nature Center actually also is having a plant sale, which is
right now.
They're doing the like pre-order sheet is going to be posted pretty soon. So because they do like a pre-order process, and then you pick it up on a certain day. I've never timed it so that I've been able to get any of those plants.
Well, yeah, and with who was it? I think was it the Racine Wild Ones?
Mm-hmm.
I think they said due to the warm winter, they're moving their sale up by like almost a month.
Oh my gosh!
Something. So yeah, when they,
right.
It's having an effect. Okay, so we can talk about this again next meeting. That if we have other resources in addition to Marion's, that we want to either get on the website or offer up to Common Council and then have links on the website and perhaps newsletter articles. That could be for the next newsletter is if you want more information on natives and landscaping, here's some resources for you.
Is there any action?
Just for us to look into any other resources that we might want to offer up as a commission, and then we'll review, discuss at our next meeting.
So are we going to wait to recommend that until after we do that? Is that what you're
That's what I was thinking.
Okay. It's February, so March. And if it got in the newsletter, that would be good.
Yeah, the newsletter just came out now, so the next one would be May, I'm guessing, April, May, June.
I think it's in June actually.
June.
I will double check. There isn't like a consistent list right now.
But as far as for the comment or for the information we have on unfinished business, the NOMO May, they're fine with not going forward with that, but they want a replacement.
Yeah, they want recommendations from you about best practices as an alternative to NOMO May.
Okay.
So the one was the mowing thing for like native fields and that kind of thing, and then the other was for landscaping. So
For landscaping, for homeowners, really.
yep.
And the other we provided already, right?
Yeah, the mowing stuff.
Okay, so we
What
don't
that
need to do
actually
that.
shows, yeah.
That part's done. But I do think that we could add on, and I don't want this to be new business, your suggestion of, and I don't know how you do it, but bringing it to the Parks and Rec and saying, hey, we'd like your support on.
You could make a referral. It's too late for their. Is it too late? It's too late for their February agenda, March agenda. Sorry,
I was going to say it's 27th February or 8th.
It's too late for the March agenda. But for April, you could look at sending the mowing information along to them as well, or if there were other things that you wanted to put forward. For a future agenda, that's an option. It's the timing of your meeting is difficult because they meet the second Monday, and so the agenda is usually finalized like right around the time that you're.
So we're always going to miss the next one and have to go to the following.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying? Yeah. Well, I'm okay with that. I think.
I think
if you are, I would still think it's worthwhile. I think that's a good suggestion.
And I also think that the timing of it is. I don't think it really hurts us because it's still early, and if the topic comes in front of the Parks Commission in April, the second Monday in April, that's still very early in that season. So it's not it's not like it's the middle of August or something like that when we're like talking about, hey, here's our best practice that we want to see in the parks, because that's end of season for them. But it's now when things are starting to. At the beginning of their season, so I think that would be a good place to begin the conversation at least.
So do you get that on their agenda for us?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. I will let the chair know.
Rad.
So that'd be April Parks meeting.
And I can, now that you're making the request, it can be a general discussion of like park maintenance, ecology, or something like that, so that you can, if you have other materials that you want to convey to them, if it's on the agenda, then that's still enough time to get stuff in the packet, maybe. So, if you have them at your next meeting.
I believe in you, Marion.
Okay. Should we include Tim? That's his name, right? The forester. Tom. I got the T right. Three-letter mailing.
I mean, he's open to hearing whatever you guys have to say.
I just mean for that meeting with the Parks and Rec, because I think he was in support of a lot of those practices. And as the person who is the boss of the people who execute, it would be good for them, I think, if he's available, if we could ask him to attend that. We talked to him after the meeting, and I think he expressed that he would like to get something going where they can start doing some of this more environmentally friendly practices.
Okay. I will, so he is under DPW staff, so I can see if that's okay. Like,
Just
they usually
ask.
have to, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt to ask.
I'm sure he's interested, so.
Okay.
Do you want to take this? Because I have a million copies
Oh,
of it.
I would love it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I can print it out for whoever else wants it. I just didn't want to do it unless you actually want it.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I have the electronic, but if you can, if you want to print it. Moving
Okay.
color. Thank you. Item C under unfinished business, the UDO rewrite, is that still on hold?
yes. So, I mean, it's moving sort of slowly towards starting up the new cycle, but we don't have a calendar set yet. So when that becomes available, it'll be in your packets. So.
Okay. To be continued. Moving on, new business, or back to new business. Item A, our involvement in Arbor Day event scheduled for May 4th. I talked with Jennifer at the library. In the event of extremely bad weather, we can have the small, I think it's the children's room as our backup location. They have yoga in the Fadro room, but we do have that. And I talked with Milwaukee Area Land Conservancy, Malik. They're planning to come. They've got a number of areas in Franklin that are under their wing. And so they'll do a little outreach, have a table, hand out some stuff for folks. And I still am planning to talk to Wild Ones to see if they would like to come, as they have in the past. I don't know if there's any other thoughts, activities, clowns.
Bring in the clown.
Can we?
Send in, you're right, send in the clowns.
Otherwise, we'll be hoping for beautiful weather on May 4th. Okay.
Seasonable weather.
Seasonable weather, yeah. Could be 95 by then. Item B, discussion of future environmental commission meeting start times.
So I have here the calendar. So your meeting time is 7 o'clock. I don't know if you like that or not. I thought we could talk about it because previously there was a member of this commission who had a conflict at 6 p.m. Because of the Technology Committee Commission. And so that affected their ability to attend. So this commission met at 7 to accommodate that. I don't know how you feel about the timing. So I will say, for me, it feels like it's a little late, but I'm obviously happy to be here. It's just.
Do you have a conflict with the time? I thought you did.
Yeah, I mean, getting off from work sooner than 6 or 6:15 would be a challenge.
I'll accommodate whatever. I can deal with whatever.
I mean,
but I understand different
6:30
people
is
have
okay
work.
if that's
6:30?
6:30.
I mean, I've been doing 7 o'clock for a while. It is a little late, but 6:30 would work.
Can you do 6:30?
I can make anything work.
Same. Same.
I'm willing to sacrifice
If you're
Wheel of
okay
Fortune.
with that, it would help Marion get to bed and get home a little earlier.
Yeah, I also
It's a
think
half
it might.
hour.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
okay.
as long as it's okay with
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
If you,
That's
yeah.
And the key of it all is that if, and this is, I think, to speak to our situation, is that, unless we're able to recruit more membership so that we can have a quorum, so that way we aren't hamstrung if if I'm out of town
When
for
you
work.
were here at 7, we were
Yeah.
already like, oh no.
Coming
we
up from St.
understand
Luke's,
it. I know. It's,
But
And it's the latest start time of any.
But it is
meeting,
one of those
so.
things of where I had a Boy Scout interview me as part of his citizenship badge, and it was really interesting because he took the tract on like what does government look like, and he had questions because I'm on this commission, and he's like, well, what can, and it was one of those like. Here are suggested questions for the elected official. And it's like, well, what can everyday citizens do? I'm like, right now, volunteer for boards and commissions.
Yeah.
I said it's very hard that I said that if Commissioner Horn was sick, that we're not able to meet, and then we're a month behind, or if Commissioner Seraphin is out of town for whatever reason, or you have a birthday party, or Marion is won the lottery last night.
We need a permanent position replacement there, don't we?
But
I mean, other
No, I know.
staffers would come, but like.
But that right there is where and then it's he turned to his mom and was like, and
Yeah.
like, feel free, fill out the form, and
Join.
love to have you. There is actually there is a resident in my district that I am gently nudging, and maybe I need to be a little less gentle with the nudge. She lives on 116th and has a wild prairie growth for her yard.
Nice.
And so I'm sure you're aware of the next to Mr. Swindrowski. I'm sure that this house has been a question mark. This was a question mark for a while back, but I think people have just kind of accepted it for what it is now, because I think that there was a lot of hue and tenor of how dare she sort of thing. But
What, not mow her grass to 3 inches? Oh.
I mean, there's quite a few actually along 116th Street. The Indian Community School now also owns a lot of those properties and are letting.
116th up in the very far north portion.
Okay. I
That-
was thinking of the different part.
My territory up there. But that, I think her perspective might be very interesting to have on the commission.
Sure.
And, you know, and I was making a push at one point for nepotism to have my daughter serve as a youth representative. But, you know, in the case of tonight where there is a
Legislative matter. And
yeah, where that you really can't have an 11-year-old kind of weigh in on that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I also would recommend or urge the members of the commission to also seek out like-minded individuals within the city to serve us as well.
I've been asking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said,
People
I have
just
two.
don't really want to commit to, yeah.
Move to
But let's
6:30 then.
6:30 is, do we need a motion?
If you could make a motion, I need to clarify if that then just goes into effect or if I need to take another step with Common Council. Because we recently changed the time of Plan Commission. I think it was just a decision of the body. But
Well, I make a motion to move the Environmental Commission meeting start time to 6:30.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Good. Motion carries. Stay tuned. Next month may or may not be at 6:30. Item C, creation of combined Parks and Environmental Commission.
I haven't had a chance to move this along in the last couple weeks, so I don't have an update on this at this time, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
Other things going on. Understood. And item E, the Red Pike Win summary of results. This was something that I had received and I thought it was kind of interesting. So it's kind of a for-your information. Red Pike Win had done a survey. This kind of, explains it, on the Respecting Our Waters survey and the results that they found from a number of municipalities. The last item, are native plants better than non-native plants for our local natural resources? And the one sheet gives you the results summarized from kind of all the municipalities, and then the second sheet was the data from Franklin. And then that last item, saying that almost 3/4 of the people do not understand the difference between native and non-native plants for stormwater infiltration and detoxification. So, gives us some things that we can be working on.
Yeah.
Insightful.
All right, that is the end of our agenda items. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 27th. Hopefully that looks good for everyone.
Looks rad.
6:30 or 7.
I will follow up with you. I'm going to be out of the office until the end of next week, but I will follow up with you once I've resolved whether it goes into effect immediately or not, so that you can plan accordingly.
Okay. So I guess we're at a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
My second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you, everyone.